Good day, and welcome to Lesson 10 in our study of the book of Daniel. Today we're going to do chapter 6, and this will bring us essentially halfway through the book of Daniel, and it will also bring us to really an end of the history of Daniel. As I said before, the main purpose of this book is to really show God's sovereignty and man's obedience. It also shows other things, including the steadfastness of Daniel and the placement of Daniel at this particular time. As one study says, Phil Moore says in his study, Straight to the Heart of Daniel and Esther, it says, God put him in this place for such a time. It was God who put him in that place for the time he was in. It says the same thing roughly in Esther, the book, because Esther was a queen, was a Jewish queen of Persia, and it was said that, who knows but that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. It was almost as if this was their destiny. It was Esther's destiny to become a queen in Persia at a time when the Jewish people needed a savior. It was also Daniel's time and destiny to be in Persia, and the Jewish people again needed someone to help them. So Daniel was taken from Jerusalem at a young age, maybe the age of 14. He was taken away from his family, his friends, his culture. He was taken to Persia, taken to Babylon, and he never again left that city to go back to his homeland. He became an advisor and a friend of Nebuchadnezzar. He became an advisor of sorts to Belshazzar. And he apparently escaped the massacre that took place the night of the feast in which Cyrus the Persian king and his army invaded Babylon and massacred Belshazzar and many of his retinue. It's interesting because Daniel, being a high official in the Babylonian state, you would think would have met the same fate as the other high people in the Babylonian kingdom when the Persians overran the state. However, Daniel escaped. He was not captured, he was not executed, and he in fact became an advisor again to the kings of Persia. So when Cyrus and his army defeated Belshazzar and took over Babylon, then the kingdom of Babylon, as it said in the end of chapter 5, passed to Darius the Mede, because this was a Mede-Persian empire. And Darius became essentially the king of Babylon. So Daniel again became very much associated with the ruling nature of the Mede-Persian Empire. And it says in the first part of chapter 6, it pleased Darius, because he had such a large empire now to rule, 120 provinces. He set up a governor over each province, and he set up 3 rulers over these governors to help control his kingdom. And I said, over these 3 governors, Daniel was one that the satraps might give account to them, so the king would not have any loss of his taxes or of the wealth, of the revenue that was coming to him. So he had these governors, and there were 3 people. He had these satraps and 3 governors to whom these satraps reported, and one of these governors was Daniel. And then because he was distinguished, Daniel distinguished himself above the governors, the king made him sort of a prime minister over the whole country. So the satraps and the other governors now reported to Daniel. This says this in the first part of chapter 6. So this was the way that the rulership of the new Mede-Persian kingdom was set up. So Daniel became the governor or the prime minister under Darius. However, this did not go well with the other governors and with the other satraps. So they tried to find a way to find a way to make Daniel less attractive, to discourage him, to destroy him in the eyes of Darius. But they could not do this. It says they could not find any charge or fault because he was faithful. There was no error or fault in him. And they therefore decided, because they were jealous, because that's what happens when one person is promoted over another, jealousy ensues, and they became jealous of Daniel. Therefore they decided to lay a plot to destroy Daniel. And so they did. They said the governors thronged before the king and said, "King Darius, live forever." It's interesting that they always said this to the king, to live forever, even though they kept worshiping gods who were not themselves alive. They were all made of stone, wood, or metal, and they had no life in them. But they always wanted to live themselves forever. So they said, "King Darius, live forever." And all of the governors and ministers and satraps have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree. Now, this wasn't exactly true, because not all the governors and all the administrators did this, because Daniel was a governor and he was not invited to this. He was not part of this. So they lied, essentially. They put a falsehood before King Darius when they said that all the administrators and satraps and governors came together to establish a royal statute. And what they wanted to do was declare that Darius would be king for 30 days, or God for 30 days. He would become the God to whom everyone would have to bow for that 30-day period of time. And Darius was sort of taken in by this, because pride always makes a person want to be more than they are. Darius sort of fell for this, and they said to him, "Establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed." According to the law of the Medes and Persians, King Darius signed the written decree. So, in an effort to trap Daniel, these people devised this plan to honor Darius by making him God for 30 days and making it so that no one could bow to any god except him. And Darius signed this. Now, in the Babylonian time, Nebuchadnezzar was an absolute monarch. He could make decrees, he could break decrees, he could make laws, break laws, he could do whatever he wanted to do because he was an absolute ruler. The Medes and Persians were a little different. They didn't have an absolute ruler, although the king was, in a sense, absolute. But there was a law that he himself had to follow. This was the law of the Medes and Persians. And one of these laws stated that if a decree was made, it could not be revoked, even by the king himself. Because the king was felt to be infallible. And if he's infallible and made a decree, then obviously he would not want to revoke that decree, if he was in fact infallible. Therefore, the law said that once a law was made, once a decree was made, it could not be revoked. So King Darius signed this decree stating that he would be made a god for 30 days and be the only one worshipped in the empire. And of course, Daniel knew about this, but it was his custom, his consistency, his life to pray to the God of Jehovah, God of Israel, his own God, 3 times a day. And so therefore, in his own room, with his windows open, and looking towards Jerusalem, he prayed. Now this idea of looking towards Jerusalem goes back to the days of King Solomon, when he made the temple, and he built the temple in Jerusalem. And it was said that people should pray towards this. And back in the book of Chronicles, it states this very clearly, that if that you would pray towards Jerusalem, and if you did this, God would bless you, God would hear your prayers, and this was the manner in which prayer was to be made. So therefore, Daniel opened his windows, knelt down on his knees, and prayed and gave thanks to God, as was his custom. So when these men saw Daniel praying to his God, they then reported him to King Darius, who had already signed the decree saying that he was the only God to whom anyone could pray. They therefore wanted the judgment to be carried out as would pertain to the law which Darius had signed. And therefore the king answered and said, "The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter." And so they said before the king that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you or for the decree you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. When Darius heard this, he was displeased, and he really did not want to follow through with his own decree, but he was trapped because the law said that a decree, once it was made, could not be revoked. And they said, "Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king established may be changed." So therefore the king gave the command and brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king also said, "Your God, whom you serve, he will deliver you." So there's an element of the fact that King Darius, although he was not of Judah, he was not a follower of God, had some faith in the fact that Daniel's own God would save him. Then the king sealed the tomb, sealed the den, sealed Daniel's supposed tomb, and signed it, sealed it with his own signet ring. So this was a trap that the satraps, the governors, the administrators of Persia had set for Daniel, because they were jealous of him, because they knew he prayed to his own God, and because they knew he would not stop. And Daniel was quite in line with this. He did not stop. He could have made excuses. He could have said, "It's only for 30 days, it's only a short time, I can still pray silently, I don't have to do it openly." But he did not do that. He stood up for what he believed in and how he believed it. And as a result, the king followed through with his own decree and threw him into the den of lions. Daniel's faith, Daniel's consistent prayer and faith, was one of the reasons why Ezekiel in chapter 14, verses 14 and 20, said he compared Daniel to Noah and Job for his faith. So Daniel was in the lion's den, and Darius went to his palace, but was restless. He never slept. He was restless. He was worried. He paced. And the next day, he went up early and went to this den of lions to see if Daniel was still living, if God had in fact saved him. And Daniel was there. He said, "O king, live forever." This was the greeting which they gave to the kings. And it was obvious there that the kings and the people wanted an eternal life, even though the gods that they themselves worshipped were made of stone and idols. He said, "Live forever." My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him, before God, and I have done, O king, nothing wrong before you. King Darius was glad, took Daniel out. He saw no injury was found in him because he believed in his God. If you go back to the previous chapters and look at the situation with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they were thrown into the fire, the only thing that was singed or burned on them when they came out of the fire was the ropes that they had been bound with when they were thrown in. Their clothes were not burned, their hair was not singed, and they had no burns whatsoever on themselves. And the same thing here with Daniel. No injury whatever was found on him because he believed in his God. We have no idea what faith can really do for us if we have enough faith to follow through on it. It says in Mark 9:23, Jesus said that all things are possible to he who believes. We have no indication or no real understanding of how serious faith is and how important it is. So, it says here, because he believed in his God. The king gave a command, and they brought these men who had accused Daniel, and they threw them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. It was a custom in those days that if you made a false accusation against anyone, then you yourself could be punished with the same punishment with which you made that would have happened to the person against whom you made the false accusation. So they made an accusation against Daniel. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den because they had made a false accusation. They themselves were thrown into the lion's den, along with their relatives, because it was believed that if one person in a family made such a false accusation, the whole family was involved. So they were thrown in. They were thrown into the children, their wives, their children, and the lions immediately overpowered them and tore them to pieces. Then King Darius wrote, "To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. We don't know exactly what happened after this, how long Daniel lived, but he lived the rest of his life under the Persian Empire. What this indicates, what this shows, in addition to God's sovereignty and man's obedience to God, was the power of prayer and the steadfastness and the need to be steadfast in prayer. There was a article that was put down in the book, in one of the Bible studies of Jeremiah, about C.L. Schofield, who was an editor of the Schofield Reference Bible. And this is what it says. He gave this testimony based upon the story of Daniel in the lion's den. "Shortly after I was saved, I passed the window of a store in St. Louis where I saw a painting of Daniel in the lion's den. That great man of faith, with his hands behind his back and those beasts circling him, was looking up. As I stood there, great hope flooded my heart. Only a few days had passed since I, a drunken lawyer, had been converted, and no one had yet told me anything about the keeping power of Jesus Christ. I thought to myself, there are lions all about me too, such as my old habits and sins. But the one who shut the lions' mouths for Daniel can also shut them for me. I knew that I could not win the battle in my own strength. The painting made me realize that while I was weak and helpless, my God was strong and able. He had saved me, and how he would deliver me from the wild beasts in my life. Oh, what a rest of spirit that truth brought me. The ideas were all surrounded by lions at all times. Daniel in the lion's den is an allegory of ourselves, always surrounded by the lions. It says in Peter that the devil goes around like a roaring lion, devouring those whom he may. But this shows that what faith in God can do, what a persistent prayer habit can do for you, and how God can help control the lions in all our lives if we only let him do it and have the faith in him that he can do it. So this story about Daniel is one of persistence right from the time of being a teenager, being in a place that he did not plan to be, perhaps he did not want to be, but in a place where he took and made the most of throughout the rest of his life, becoming friends of the kings, advisors to the emperors, and at the same time, although in a foreign culture, remaining steadfast to his God and praying to his God in a consistent and steadfast manner. And as a result, he survived. He survived a number of incidents which most people would not. Perhaps he survived because God had put him in that place for that particular time in order to help his people, even though at the time he probably did not understand why he was in such a place. So this is the story of Daniel. This is the story of Daniel's life under the Babylonian kings, under the Persian kings, and he probably died under the reign of King Cyrus. But what he did for the Jewish people is history. So this ends chapter 6. This is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. A very familiar story to many people, the same as Daniel and the Colossus, his vision of this huge Colossus, which foretold the different empires of the world. And as familiar as the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And this pretty well ends the story of Daniel. But we now get into some of the prophecies that he foretold while he was in Babylon and under kings Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. So this ends it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll join me next week as we get into chapter 7. But for now, bye for now, and hope to see you next week.